"They can't take your water," my wife shouted, slamming the HOA letter on the table. I stared at the words that flipped our peaceful world upside down. The Cascade Heights HOA had declared the natural spring on our land a flood hazard, threatening daily $500 fines unless we drained it. That spring wasn't just water. It was a living piece of my family's history, flowing for generations, nurturing wildlife, and cooling the neighborhood. But the HOA had no idea what that spring really did, or what would happen when they messed with it. Victoria Reed, the new HOA president, had hated the spring since she moved in. She called it an eyesore, claimed it lowered property values. But we soon realized it wasn't about safety, it was about power and profit. She pushed through a vote to remove the spring, backed by a so-called geological report prepared by her brother-in-law. I demanded answers at the HOA meeting, but Victoria brushed off every challenge, hiding behind legal jargon and smirking at our frustration. Behind closed doors, she was plotting to sell off our land to developers. All she needed was that spring out of the way. Even our neighbors started acting strange. Martha, who once fed ducks with her grandkids at our spring, voted to remove it after Victoria promised to approve her home extension. The betrayal was piling up. Digging through dusty county records, I found proof. The survey was a fraud. Worse, our spring wasn't just a quaint water feature. It was part of a historic watershed system, a natural pressure valve for the underground aquifer that ran beneath our entire neighborhood. If that spring was drained, groundwater pressure could skyrocket. Flooding, cracks, foundation collapses. I launched a simple website with all the evidence, photos, documents, and maps. At first, no one believed me. But everything changed the day the pumps arrived. At dawn, Victoria's crew rolled in. Massive industrial pumps roared as they drained the spring dry. My wife Sarah filmed it all. Ducks scattered. Our old willows wilted, and a pit of cracked mud was all that remained. 3 days later, the Johnsons' basement flooded. Then the Garcias, then Martha. Grass turned to sludge. Driveways cracked. Insurance companies blamed groundwater intrusion and denied every claim. Victoria denied responsibility. Isolated incidents, she said, old pipes, but our inboxes filled with complaints. Soggy carpets, Moldavian families in panic. The community was split. Some blamed us for resisting the HOA. Others started realizing the truth. My inbox was full, some angry, some grateful. Sam, a hydrologist friend from college, showed up at our door with maps and monitors. Sam's readings confirmed everything. Groundwater pressure was rising at an unsustainable rate. Homes were literally being pushed up from below. Then came the whistleblowers. Harold, the HOA treasurer, handed over suspicious financial records. Martha confessed. Victoria had offered board votes in exchange for loyalty. The biggest shock? Victoria's brother-in-law, the surveyor, owned the drainage company that got the $2 million HOA contract. We were pawns in a land grab scheme. With help from Sam, we mapped the aquifer's imbalance. We shared our data in the neighborhood Facebook group. People who once sided with Victoria now demanded an emergency meeting. Local reporters picked up the story. Spring destroyed, neighborhood drowns. Headlines spread. Environmental groups started calling. Our small crisis had become a statewide scandal. The HOA reluctantly held a meeting. Victoria strutted in, smiling smugly. "Basement floods are unfortunate," she said, "but that spring was never essential." Just then, a loud crack echoed through the room. The floor of Victoria's kitchen, visible through the meeting hall's windows, erupted in a geyser of water. Victoria gasped. Reporters rushed forward. It was poetic justice. The very woman who drained the spring was now flooded out by the consequences. Neighbors snapped photos. Video clips hit social media before the meeting even ended. Victoria was arrested that evening. Charges: fraud, conspiracy, environmental destruction. Her face was on every news channel by nightfall. The HOA board collapsed. State investigators stepped in. The damage was widespread. Dozens of homes were impacted. Foundations crumbled. Mold spread. Insurance companies refused to pay. Legal battles dragged on. But we had momentum. With Victoria in jail, a court granted access to HOA funds. Combined with state emergency relief, we began to rebuild. Kids helped replant trees. Engineers redesigned drainage systems. Sam oversaw the reopening of the spring, carefully, slowly, and it worked. The water flowed again. Green returned to the lawns. Even Martha planted new willows. Victoria was sentenced to 15 years. Her brother-in-law's company was shut down. The spring was given permanent protection status. No HOA can touch it again. Cascade Heights changed forever. We rewrote the bylaws. Every future decision requires environmental review and public vote. Universities now study our neighborhood as a model for sustainable suburban living. Environmental justice groups use our case as training material. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't angry words or lawsuits. It's letting the truth flow freely. Like water. I often sit by the spring now, watching ducks return, trees sway, and children laugh. Nature doesn't forget. And when you try to silence it, it always finds a way to rise.